For 17 years, Stock Car Steel has been a leading materials supplier to the racing industry. We're proud they're a Motorsports content partner here at Race Chaser Online. The biggest names in NASCAR trust Stock Car Steel for raw materials such as carbon steel, chrome moly, DOM, aluminum, plastics, and much more. You can't build a race car without the basic materials, and Stock Car Steel is the place to get them. Don't forget to also visit Stock Car Steel's sister company, SRI Supplies, for racing and industry. SRI is the place to go for all your shop supply needs. Nuts, bolts, rivets, tapes, adhesives, cutting tools, chemicals, body shop supplies, paint shop supplies, lubricants, and more. A well-stocked race shop is a winning race shop, and the path to winning begins with 3 letters, SRI. For more information, visit stockcarsteel.com or SRI-supplies.com. Check them both out on Facebook or call them toll-free at 1-888-752-7272, 1-888-752-7272.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports.
Dale Earnhardt Jr., the Pied Piper of Daytona, trying to hold them all at bay.
That 88 is pulling away.
Checkered flag waving, it's over, it's Earnhardt!
Oh, race fans, it is that time. It is the day after, and we hope after a long night of watching everything from around the world of motorsports that you're here tonight on Motorsports Madness as we break down everything that's gone on over the past 72 hours, from Daytona Speed Weeks to AMA Supercross, NHRA. You want it, we've got it here on the Madness. And certainly there's no story bigger than from some of the sound bites you heard in our open circulating around the Daytona 500. We'll get to everything Speed Weeks in just a moment, but we're glad you're along for the ride. It's the Madness on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. Hang on tight and we'll get started. Hello everyone and welcome to Speed77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser Online. I'm Jacob Seelman. Alongside my colleagues here at the round table, Tom Baker, James Pike. Gentlemen, first off, good evening. Tom, I tell you what, we had to stay up late to catch the ending to the weekend of motorsports, but any race fan that watched last night in prime time, no less, for the 56th running of the Daytona 500 was in no way disappointed.
Certainly, Jacob, it was an exciting race. Not a ton of options, but obviously enough to take some cars out, unfortunately. But a lot of energy in the 500, and I thought actually after we got going, after all of the rain and everything else, I thought the prime time laps in that race were some of the best I've seen in years. Just was able to pass each other without a lot of help from behind. And I thought the aggression level of the drivers in terms of passing each other throughout the race was extremely high, especially up front racing for the lead. I just thought it was a great race.
I have to agree with you there. I mean, you look at the statistics alone. We had 5 lead changes before the caution for rain that slowed us. Following that caution for rain through the rest of the 500 miles that made up the Daytona 500, it got exciting. I believe in total we had a grand total, if memory serves me correctly, of 42 lead changes over the course of that 500 miles, and certainly a very, very dicey event, as you said. James, We heard drivers say after this event that they don't want NASCAR to touch this package for the Sprint Cup Series, and by far the 500 was the most competitive race of the weekend. We didn't see quite as much action in the other two races, the Nationwide Series and the Camping World Truck Series. Could NASCAR take a lesson from what we saw on Sunday to go towards their feeder series more or less?
I think there's definitely a few things that you could take from the big race on Sunday and put into the trucks and the nationwide cars. Of course, I think you have to remember that the trucks are a little bit of a work in progress since they just debuted that Gen 3 chassis and body. So I think they'll get that sorted out over time, but you have to have a few races to, I think, really get a sample from which you go forward with and build a good package for them with. As for the nationwide guys, I don't really think there was that much that was messed up beyond the James Busher penalty, but I know you're going to get to that later. So, but I think the bump drafting, or lack thereof rather, actually helped out a lot. It helped keep us Big One free for the most part, at least during the race. We didn't see Wreck until after the checkers, and really made for some good racing up at the front of the field. I think that's more, or at least that race on Saturday was more in line with what NASCAR envisioned when they put this new generation nationwide car on the track. They wanted to see racing that was more like this, where you have lots of guys bouncing around, lots of passes for the lead, lots of action up front, and few wrecks, which we had all of on Saturday. So maybe more so the Truck Series and the nationwide guys, but all in all, just a pretty solid weekend, I think, for NASCAR. They'll be happy with this.
Kyle Souza, I want to turn to you. Welcome back, first of all, to the round table here. You were on assignment for us in Daytona Beach all weekend long, and you were there all the way until the checkered flag when we saw a little bit of history 10 years in the making, so to speak. Kyle, I know you watched everything from your vantage point. What was it like down there on Sunday night once the rains finally left us and the racing got back underway? Because I know just watching it from where we were stationed here at Race Chaser headquarters, it was certainly a very, very electric atmosphere once these drivers got back to green. Even though they were only 40 laps in, it felt like going for broke.
Jacob, from a fan standpoint and from a reporter standpoint, it was a long, long day, but well worth it when it was done. When we first started at 1:30, we knew rain was in the area. We didn't know how close. When it started at about 2:13 Eastern time, we took cover underneath the grandstand. I actually went back to the van for a little while, came back, went back and forth. There was a tornado warning at one point, but when all that got said and done, the Air Titans went to work. We took the green flag just after 8:30, and Tom mentioned that it was some of the best excitement I've seen at Daytona. This my now 11th Daytona 500 straight, going down there to the World Center of Racing, coming back this afternoon. One of the most electric 500s I've ever seen. Under the lights, we saw 2012. The first one under the lights was interesting. This one, unbelievable. A lot of side-by-side racing. They were 3 and 4 wide, literally bouncing off one another for the final 30 or 40 laps of the event. But it just seemed like once the 88 got out front, they were going to have a hard time passing them. Greg Biffle, Kyle Edwards took turns. Jimmy Johnson had a run at one point. But it just looked like once Junior got out front, I didn't think they were going to pass him, and they surely didn't. Denny Hamlin making a late run. Tom, an interesting 500 overall, but from the history standpoint, got to love the excitement. The fans were ecstatic when the checkered flag flew.
They were. Well, I think half the country was ecstatic when the checkered flag flew, judging especially from the social media sphere after the race was over. And Jacob, I love the way you described that. It really did feel like that they were going for broke almost from the time they threw the green after the rain. That's a great way to describe what I was trying to in my opening segment there. It was just unusual to me, the level of aggression that the guys had about running in the front of the field, and you could really sense that there was going to be some intense racing when it got down to the last 20, 30 laps. But what I found interesting, guys, is the fact that, in the past, we've been used to seeing mates working together to help guys get the lead. This year, I think some of it was accidental just by position on restarts or whatever, but you had guys from other teams helping guys from other teams get to the lead much more so than what I've seen in the past. And it was just kind of interesting who was helping who and how it all turned out, and just all of the position swaps, especially in the top 10, but really throughout the field. It seemed like there were probably 25 to 30 cars that could have won this race right up until, the very end of it.
Yeah, and before we get to some of that late race aggression, let's talk about the Daytona 500, because we got it underway on schedule, normal time, and then no more did we get it underway than we had a couple of early issues. We saw Kyle Larson spin early and ultimately have problems. We'll talk about him a little later because he was tied up in a couple more things when the lights turned on, but you had Martin Truex Jr., the outside pole sitter, who was looking for a very strong effort, unfortunately derailed by an oil pump belt coming off that engine and the engine grenading on that number 78 car. His day was done. That brought out the second caution, which was then extended by what we'll call the big splash, if you will, a 6-hour and 22-minute red flag for rain that pushed this race from what was going to be an afternoon spectacle into a primetime under-the-lights spectacular. After we finally got the track dried, Kyle and Tom, as you both alluded to, business picked up. We had 160 laps basically under the lights, and you had guys like Kyle Busch, Carl Edwards, Jimmy Johnson at one point led the Great American Race. Danica Patrick was up there for a couple of laps, at least in her third Daytona 500 start. You had guys like Trevor Bayne, Terry Labonte, Reed Sorensen have strong runs right up until the very end. Under the lights, it was incredible. But Kyle, as you alluded to, a little bit past halfway after Dale Earnhardt Jr. took the lead from Jimmy Johnson and Paul Menard, there was no stopping the 88 car. He had the best car when it counted, I believe is how you put it, James, and I would definitely have to agree. Earnhardt Jr. leads the most laps, nearly 60 laps on the night, to go to victory lane for the second time in the Great American Race, dodging a couple of late race incidents. We saw Trevor Bayne get into the wall late after he broke loose off turn 2. We saw 3 multi-car crashes, Tom. We had one where Kevin Harvick and Brian Scott got together, and that sparked a huge melee that took out Danica Patrick, Michael Waltrip, among others. Justin Allgaier got a piece of that one. In all, I think 15 cars wiped out in that one on the front straightaway. We had a second crash where you saw a couple of rookies, Austin Dillon and Kyle Larson, get together and go for a ride. That took out 8 or 9 cars that could have easily contended. And then, of course, you had the third wreck that ultimately handed the trophy to the driver of the number 88 coming off turn 4 to the checkered flag, when, again, Kevin Harvick squeezes a driver up. In this case, it was Jamie McMurray getting squeezed into the wall off turn 4. That sparks a melee coming to the flag. Carl Edwards taken out in it. McMurray, Harvick, Reed Sorensen, who ran as high as 4th at one point, and I know I was up on the edge of my seat watching that Tommy Baldwin car take laps and be in a position to potentially win the Great American Race. But in the end, it was Denny Hamlin making a charge on a green-white checker finish. Tom, he came so close to sweeping Speed Weeks at Daytona, but as you and I alluded to following that race, 94 one-thousandths of a second may be close, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades.
Yeah, that's about it. It was a great Speed Weeks for Denny Hamlin, and I think if there was anyone who was concerned that maybe Denny Hamlin had lost a step or that the team needed more time to recover from last season, that was quickly erased over the course of the last couple of weeks. And I know it's Daytona, but nonetheless, they came out prepared, they came out strong, and they came out consistent. And Denny Hamlin certainly showed that he's going to be a contender for the championship. The interesting thing for me about this race, guys, was that we really didn't hear too awfully much from the Hendrick Motorsports stable throughout the entire week. I mean, other than the fact that they blew some motors, we really didn't hear a lot from them. And yet, when it came down to crunch time, not just one, but every single one of the Hendrick Motorsports cars were up in the front and in the mix and battling for the win. It was really unbelievable how they just seemed to come out of nowhere.
And you know what? It seems like they do that almost every time they come down to the Daytona 500. Jimmy Johnson, when he won the 500 last year, we didn't hear anything about him in practice. Didn't hear anything about him in the Budweiser duels. But when it came down to crunch time, 40 laps to go in the Daytona 500, there was Jimmy Johnson in the mix and ultimately going to victory lane. Pretty much, except for Dale Earnhardt Jr., these guys pulled the same strategy yet again.
Jacob, and you know what? The side point of that was Jeff Gordon. Gordon hung around inside the top 10, the 15, for most of the event. But the side part of it was Gordon was there at the finish, and I mean there. That last restart, he pushed Dale Jr. away, and I think that was critical, guys, the restarts that Dale Earnhardt Jr. got on the entrance of turn number 4 when they came around to the green flag. Junior had a great restart every single time. It was interesting to see. Now we're going to have to look out for Jeff Gordon this season. He made a strong push yesterday afternoon, but I do think that Gordon had a car that could have won the Daytona 500 if he was put in the right lane there at the finish. Junior, of course, the only Hendrick car, can go to victory lane, but Tom, you mentioned it, all of them strong until Casey Kane had his little incident there coming off the pit lane just past the halfway point.
Yeah, not only that, but if you look at the way they ran in yesterday's race, it wasn't just that they were all strong. They all seemed to be as strong as each other. So that really showed me something about where they're at right now. You know, we tend to buy Jimmy Johnson. We tend to buy Casey Kane, perhaps, but I think we tend to sell both Junior and Jeff Gordon most of the time when we shouldn't. All 4 of those cars are capable of winning on any given day, and I have the feeling that this year it certainly looks like Junior, he looks so comfortable, and he looks so relaxed, and he looks so sure of himself and so confident, and I know it's Daytona, folks. I know it's a plate race, but when you spend as much time as I do working on the mental game with racers, you can almost tell when somebody has gotten comfortable in their own skin. And I think after all this time that's passed with Junior, I think he's at a point now where he's just very comfortable. He's very happy. He's very confident. He's very excited about what he's doing. And he drove yesterday with the confidence of a champion. And that's exactly what he now has the chance to be, because, guys, Dale Earnhardt Jr., unless he just completely falls off the map for the next 25 races and finishes out of the top 30 in points, Dale Earnhardt Jr. has just put himself in the chase for the Cup after week 1.
Yes, he has, and that was maybe the biggest part about that Daytona 500 win is an all but sealed chase berth for Dale Earnhardt Jr., and he alluded to it in his post-race interview. Coming up, we'll talk more from the Daytona International Speedway. We'll have more wrap-up from the 500, and we will also have coverage of the Nationwide and Camping World Truck Series races. Yeah, Friday night, that guy, Kyle Busch, ended up in victory lane. We'll talk more from Daytona in a moment, but first, these words, you're listening to Motorsports Madness on Speed77 Radio, powered by Race Chaser Online. We'll be right back after this.
Hi, this is Jamie McMurray here for RAD, the entertainment industry's voice for road safety. Want to make a difference? It's simple. Be responsible. Plan ahead. Designate before you celebrate. Friends don't let friends drive drunk.
A public service message brought to you by the U.S. Department of Transportation, RAD, the National Association of Broadcasters, and the Ad Council.
Coming to Tampa Bay, I said we want to win a Super Bowl, and I believe we will.
From IamSecond.com.
We came close, but never really did win that championship.
Former NFL head coach Tony Dungy.
At the end of my 6th year, I was fired, and it was one of the biggest disappointments of my life. Next year, I'm in Indianapolis, get to the playoffs, but get knocked out again. And for the next couple of years, it's the same thing. Everyone is saying Colts are never going to win one. And I did wonder, why didn't it pan out the way I thought it would? But I determined that I had to have Christ first, and that everything else came below that, including my own desires. The next year, that ended up being our year to go to the Super Bowl and win it, and it was a wonderful feeling. Every decision I make, I'm going to make it through through the lens of Jesus Christ, and he'd guide us to that ultimate victory.
Watch Tony's story at IamSecond.com.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
Powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed77 Radio and RaceChaserOnline.com. Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, James Pike, and Kyle Souza right now around the round table. Joining us shortly, Stephen Ovens going to pop on to wrap up some of the dirt news and notes from around Florida Speed Weeks. And a little bit later, James, you and I will take to the underground and the nitty-gritty of the V8 supercars world. But first, let's finish wrapping up Daytona Speed Weeks. Friday night, the Camping World Truck Series came to the high banks of the Daytona International Speedway to have what we thought was going to be a rough and tumble affair, Tom. Usually the truck race, the wildest race of Speed Weeks, and I can't believe I'm saying this, but for the first time in my memory, a relatively tame Daytona truck race, and in the end, who else would win a truck race but the guy who's finished second 3 times and won everything else there is to win in the truck series, except at Daytona, and we're calling it a tame race that he won? Kyle Busch goes to victory lane in the trucks.
Well, any race Kyle Busch wins hardly ever seems to be a tame race. There's something about Kyle Busch being in a race that just makes the phrase tame race seem like an oxymoron, doesn't it? But I know what you mean, and it was. It seemed that the word that I came up with for it was sterile. It just seemed like it was really devoid of a lot of the usual rock'em sock'em kind of action that we're used to seeing in the truck. And I don't know why that was. I don't know if it was the new package they had or I don't really know what to say, but it was a great finish. I mean, certainly Timothy Peters should have had the race won, but Kyle Busch just refused to lose. And I think that was the first sign that we were going to have a weekend full of dramatic finishes, was that race on Friday. But overall, it just really didn't turn out to be the back and forth kind of affair that we're all used to with the trucks.
No, it really didn't. And when you talk about sterile, Ben Kennedy started from pole and led the first 52 laps of that race before a pit road miscue. 0 lead changes in the first half, and really only 8 lead changes overall in that truck race. Kyle, you were there Friday night for that truck race, and surprisingly, a lack of passing. But Kyle Busch, again, made the pass that counted in a thrilling finish. And watching it, I still don't know how he got the run after Timothy Peters all but squeezed him into the wall to still win that race at the stripe.
The funny part about it was, Jacob, we again had a rain delay before it started. We started the race late. I believe we started about 8:30. Don't quote me on that. It was about an hour late. We finally took the green flag. And the side part of it was we did not see a lot of passing. It was a lot of the double file racing, but it wasn't like one car could get out in front and pull away and another car could pass. And it was like whoever got out in the lead stayed there. And it looked like from the grandstand perspective, all the way around the racetrack in the final lap, we're saying, well, Timothy Peters has got this one. You look to your left, you look to your right. People were picking up their bags because it looked like they were a single file formation, similar to what we saw last night. Once Dale Jr. got out front, people thought, you know what, that's it. It was the case last night, but not Friday night. Kyle with that fanatic move to the outside. And if you weren't paying attention, you would have never known it. Because listening to MRN as well in the grandstands, MRN's Barney Hall said that Timothy Peters had become a 2-time winner of the race, and then when he looked down, Kyle Busch won the race. So Kyle came out of nowhere taking that win. Sparks an interesting conversation on if Kyle and friends should be in the truck series, but that's for a different discussion. But overall, a very tame and interesting truck race, minus that one pile up there in turn 1 past the halfway point.
Yeah, and that was a really tough wreck for several cars, taking out 8 or 10 vehicles in that one that probably changed the complexion, took out several very strong cars in that one, Kyle, I know, but ultimately the master of the Truck Series strikes again. Ron Hornaday may have the most wins, but Kyle Busch by far has been the most efficient, picking up his 36th career Truck Series victory. And get this statistic, he has now become the first driver in major American motorsports to win an ARCA Racing Series, Camping World Truck Series, Nationwide Series, and Sprint Cup Series race, all at the same racetrack, and he's done it at the most historic racetrack of all, James, the Daytona International Speedway.
Yeah, Ron Hornaday needs to watch out because Kyle Busch is quickly closing in on that record, and it wouldn't shock me if we didn't have to wait too much longer before Kyle Busch became the winningest driver in the history of the Camping World Truck Series. So watch out for Rowdy. He's going to be really, really quick. And in the races that he's in, he's always a threat to win. He's just really, really good at whatever he drives.
Yeah, he is. He's not going to be in the truck this weekend. Eric Jones going to take over driving duties of that number 51 Toyota Tundra. So it'll be interesting to see, or rather, not this weekend. I forget they've moved the Phoenix race for the Truck Series this year to November, so we actually won't see Eric Jones this weekend with the trucks. They'll be in action at Martinsville Speedway, and let it be known for the record that, amazingly, I can mess up my schedules every once in a while. It comes from getting all these things crammed up here at once, and from the excitement of the weekend, too. You want to talk about exciting? The truck finish was exciting. The nationwide finish, even more so. And I'm going to go to the guy that, for once, was louder than I was at the finish of that race. Tom, your hometown favorite, Regan Smith, gets revenge and redemption at Daytona 1 year after being turned by Brad Keselowski coming to the checkered flag in a race that Tony Stewart ultimately won. Regan passes none other than Brad Keselowski on the final lap, 13 one-thousandths of a second, the Cato, New York driver to victory lane for Junior Motorsports in a thrilling finish.
Well, first of all, clear. To say that Regan is my hometown favorite is a bit inaccurate. Regan is from the same part of central New York I'm from, but not the same exact city. In fact, Regan's town, the little town of Cato, New York, is much smaller than Oswego, New York, where I'm originally from. But nonetheless, yes, definitely. And I've known Regan since he was 5 and watched him race basically his entire career from the time he started with the Syracuse Geddes Micron Club up in the Syracuse area. Again, just a class act for a racer and a gentleman. Comes from a great family. His parents, just great people, and the type of people that you want to get to know. It was great to see him get the win. He really felt bad after last year with that wreck coming to the finish line, and he understood that even though he was arguably doing what any other driver would have done and trying to throw the block on Brad Keselowski last year, that part and parcel triggered the major incident that caused all of the issue at the end of that race and the fans and all of that. So certainly not a great way to walk out of Daytona last year in his debut for Junior Motorsports there. And so I know that I was really thinking at the end of this year's race, coming across the line for the win, the fact that the demons, some demons I think were gone for him. Redemption was his, and he had to feel some sense of relief there. And of course the excitement of winning at Daytona, big win for Regan, and I think a great start for the Junior Motorsports team and organization, new crew chief, a lot of new things going on at Junior Motorsports this year, really from the top down. So it was, again, though, guys, what a phenomenal race this was. At least I thought it was all the way through. And at the end, it was so wide open. And it was good to see a Nationwide Series regular get the win. Although, there's a lot of flap about the Cup regulars still. There were only a handful of them or so in this race, and of course a lot of people complaining about Kyle winning the truck race, but when you put Kyle in a truck and let him run the truck race, you really pretty much expect that he's going to be contending for the win. But it was good to see a Nationwide Series regular get the win here, and I think the first time that had happened in quite a while, is it not?
Statboy says the first time since 2001 when Randy LaJoie took the victory in the season opening race. From 2002 to 2013, a 12-race straight stretch of Cup regulars going to victory lane, including 3 by Dale Earnhardt Jr., 1 by Kevin Harvick, 1 by Clint Bowyer, and 7 by James's personal favorite when he runs the nationwide opener at Daytona, Tony Stewart. Stewart, of course, tied for the all-time nationwide wins record at Daytona with 7, a mark that Dale Earnhardt Jr. was trying to equal. He had his problems, finished 11th, and then triggered Kyle an accident after the checkered flag that took out, I believe, Joe Nemechek, Kyle Larson, who was involved in a skirmish on the last lap for the second year in a row, and Ryan Reed when it was all said and done as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a crazy race. That accident with Ryan Reed was just insane.
Yeah, it was. And actually, Dale Earnhardt Jr., being the bigger man after that incident, said he was going to replace all the cars that had been totaled in that wreck. So Dale Earnhardt Jr. stepping up to the plate, saying it was my fault, but I'll make it right. We'll fix this and move on going forward. Of course, Jr. only running a handful of races this season. Kevin Harvick going to fill out the season in that 88 car along with potentially a couple other drivers throughout the season. But again, an exciting race, a frantic finish. Regan Smith gets the flag for his 4th career nationwide victory. Trevor Bayne comes home 3rd behind Smith and Keselowski. Great run for the 2011 Daytona 500 winner. Of course, as we documented, his Sunday did not end nearly as well as we'd anticipated. So Daytona Speed Weeks, 3 races, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, 3 different winners, and believe it or not, I believe the tie atop the standings for our Motorsports Madness picks is pretty well deadlocked. DJ had Kyle Busch on Friday, who got the win. I had Regan Smith on Saturday, and of course Regan got the victory there. And on Sunday, Dale Earnhardt Jr., Stephen Ovens picked Jr. to win the 500, and lo and behold, did Stephen nail that one on the head. So, Tom, I thought none of us were going to be right, but in the end, we actually, between us, picked all 3 winners.
Yeah, well, it's always fun to just to do that at the end of a show just to see how it goes. I guess now we've set the precedent, so we're going to have to continue it throughout the year, if only for personal pride here. But it was really, all in all, it was a great weekend, and it was so cool to see that really everybody walked away from the weekend for the most part without any serious injuries. We had some pretty nasty looking crashes, but no real serious injuries over the course of the weekend, and that's always a big relief when you're running a plate race weekend at Daytona or Talladega. So, and really, I know we're not doing black flag, checkered flag yet, but I'm going to just throw an early checkered flag out to NASCAR. A lot of people I've seen some social media chatter, and also was watching one of the ESPN sports shows here this afternoon while I was working, and some folks kind of getting on NASCAR for keeping the fans there so long to get the race in, but instead of running it today. But those people just don't get it. This isn't like a baseball game or a football game. And Kyle, you're probably a good example of someone who, I don't know if you maybe might not have been able to stay there today to watch the race if it had been run. I know there are a lot of people in that situation, so I just don't understand the criticism of NASCAR for that. They did everything they could. They got the race in last night. It was a great race. I don't get that.
Tom, from a fan perspective first, you want to stay and watch the race. We got there at 9 a.m. yesterday morning. It rained. We ran some race. It rained. Then we had a long delay. But you know what? It was what it was. Back in 2012, share a quick side story before we go to commercial break. 2012, it rains. I end up going home Monday morning because we're booked on a flight. We were in the same situation this year. We run the race in prime time. We lose all the money. We still decide to go in 2013. And we see a great race last year. We see a great one yesterday night into the night. I think I got back to the hotel just about 1 o'clock up and drove over to Orlando for the plane at 3 o'clock. So you know what? I haven't slept all but 2 hours, but we're here, we're working, and it was a great Speed Week's conclusion yesterday night. Once again, congratulations to Dale Jr., the whole 88 team. A great conclusion to Speed Week's, Jacob. And I know we're set for a great 2014 season that's now on the horizon for not only Junior, but all of NASCAR Top 3 Series.
Yeah, we are, and congratulations to Steve Letarte while we're at it, because for the guy who's going to the broadcast booth in 2015 and said all he wanted to do as a crew chief was win the Daytona 500, his driver delivered. Congratulations, Steve Letarte. You are a champion crew chief of the Great American Race. With that, we're going to take our halftime caution flag, at least of this hour. We're going to have some bonus coverage when we cross 8 o'clock as well tonight. But for now, these words, and when we come back, we'll throw the green flag and maybe some black and checkered flags while we're at it, too, as we break down all the good, bad, and ugly from Speed Weeks. It's Black Flag, Checkered Flag next on the Madness. After these words, you're listening to Speed 77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. We'll be right back.
For 17 years, Stock Car Steel has been a leading materials supplier to the racing industry. We're proud they're a Motorsports content partner here at Race Chaser Online. The biggest names in NASCAR trust Stock Car Steel for raw materials such as carbon steel, chrome moly, DOM, aluminum, plastics, and much more. You can't build a race car without the basic materials, and Stock Car Steel is the place to get them. Don't forget to also visit Stock Car Steel's sister company, SRI Supplies, for racing and industry. SRI is the place to go for all your shop supply needs. Nuts, bolts, rivets, tapes, adhesives, cutting tools, chemicals, body shop supplies, paint shop supplies, lubricants, and more. A well-stocked race shop is a winning race shop, and the path to winning begins with 3 letters, SRI. For more information, visit stockcarsteel.com or SRI-supplies.com. Check them both out on Facebook or call them toll-free at 1-888-752-7272, 1-888-752-7272.
Coming to Tampa Bay, I said we want to win a Super Bowl, and I believe we will.
From IamSecond.com.
We came close, but never really did win that championship.
Former NFL head coach Tony Dungy.
At the end of my 6th year, I was fired, and it was one of the biggest disappointments of my life. Next year, I'm in Indianapolis, get to the playoffs, but get knocked out again. And for the next couple of years, it's the same thing. Everyone is saying Colts are never going to win one. And I did wonder, why didn't it pan out the way I thought it would? But I determined that I had to have Christ first, and that everything else came below that, including my own desires. The next year, that ended up being our year to go to the Super Bowl and win it, and it was a wonderful feeling. Every decision I make, I'm going to make it through the lens of Jesus Christ, and He'd guide us to that ultimate victory.
Watch Tony's story at IamSecond.com.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed 77 Radio,
Powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed 77 Radio and RaceChaserOnline.com. Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, James Pike, and Kyle Souza in the house as we break down everything from the biggest weekend in motorsports, pretty much of the entire opening half of this season, save for maybe Memorial Day weekend, but an exciting Speed Weeks all around, and now we're going to roll into the good, the bad, and the ugly as we talk Black Flag, Checkered Flag here on the Madness. It's where we talk cheers, jeers, and sometimes just downright what the heck here on the Madness. And I'm going to start because my first Black Flag of the evening goes to Saturday's NASCAR Nationwide Series event, and particularly one call after halfway in that event. NASCAR making a call and enforcing their no tandem drafting rule just after halfway, and bite James Buescher, who was at the time drafting with Brad Keselowski. However, we've always defined tandem drafting in the past as two drivers being locked together in that aerodynamic tandem. In this case, and onboard footage from Brad Keselowski out the back looking at James Buescher proves it. Buescher was never locked on to Keselowski's bumper for more than about a second at a time. He was doing pretty much the best bump drafting he could without tandeming, but there was daylight 95% of the time between the two bumpers of those cars. Black flag to NASCAR. They're supposed to have every possible angle from around this racetrack, including the onboard camera footage, to look at, and I'm sorry, when you look at the footage, that's just a bad call in my opinion. James Buescher pretty well got screwed, rallied back to finish 16th, I believe it was, at the end of that one, but Buescher got black flagged out of a top 10, probably could have had a shot to contend for the victory. NASCAR got it wrong, in my opinion, on this one. They wanted to see daylight. There was certainly daylight, and James Buescher, I believe, got an unfair penalty. So there's my first black flag of the night. We'll come back to my checkered flag a little bit later, Tom, but I'm going to go to you here next on the table.
All right, and I'm going to go with my black flag, and my black flag goes to Fox News. Why, you ask, would I black flag Fox News on a motorsports show? Because Fox News joined the other hundreds or thousands of goofballs who apparently could not read their own Fox broadcast's ticker on the bottom that said 2013 Daytona 500 replay. And Fox News reported Jimmy Johnson as the winner of the Daytona 500 yesterday afternoon, and then had to sheepishly apologize. Black flag, Fox News. I'm going to pass to James. You're up. Go.
Well, I was going to have all the Twitter people and everybody who thought that Jimmy won the 500 as my black flag. But since you kind of already took that, I forget his name, but there was one guy on Twitter who retweeted all of the reactions from the people who thought that the tape delay was the actual 2014 Daytona 500. And for all the laughs that he gave me, I will give him a checkered flag and make sure that we get him mentioned by name before the show closes, because I just had a complete and total ball reading all of the things that he retweeted. So much fun to see all of that go down in the 6 hours that we had to sit around and wait for the 500 to get going again. My other checkered flag, a little bit more personal note, is going to go to Greg Biffle, because while Greg Biffle did not win the Daytona 500 and did not validate his status as my personal pick to win, he was up there for the majority of the race and played a very large part in my triple header victory in all three fantasy leagues that I was in this weekend. So, Greg Biffle, thank you for putting me on a good start and giving me a good foot to push off into the world of fantasy NASCAR with in 2014. Checkered flag to you. Nice job. Keep it up in Phoenix. Now, I think Kyle Souza, I think you've got a few black flags and checkered flags yourself.
Guys, I'm going to throw a different perspective at you for the black flag. And my black flag is going to go to Daytona International Speedway for the issues that they had this weekend that are probably sidetracked because you only saw what was going on TV. Most fans for the Daytona Rising Project. A complete mess in Turn 4 at Daytona, walking through the grandstands. You couldn't find the right gate to get into your seat. The signs weren't where they belonged. There were different ushers that were telling you the wrong way to go because they weren't completely sure with the new Rising process that is going. It looks like it's going along beautifully. The seats look beautiful like they're coming up, but a black flag to Daytona International Speedway's organization for not having the people out there that needed to be out there and not knowing exactly where you needed to go to get to your seat for the Daytona 500. I know there are a lot of fans that were a little bit aggravated last night, especially because they parked so far away. It started raining. They had to run back and forth, and they couldn't find their seat when it first started. Checkered flag to the Dale Earnhardt Jr., Steve Letarte combination that I think is going to continue to grow in their final season so far, and they ran a great race yesterday. I know Letarte's pit calls kind of overlooked because this is the Daytona 500, but his calls to keep Jr. in front with those two tires and fuel-only stops late, give him a shot. Checkered flag to Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Steve Letarte. That combination is going to continue to spell wonders as this season continues on.
All right, my turn again. I've got 2 checkered flags that I want to throw out here to start the nice portion of this segment. My first checkered flag of the afternoon going to go to a driver who did not get the finish he deserved, but had an absolutely astounding Daytona 500, ran as high as 4th at one point, and I know there were a lot of kids across America that were looking for this guy to finish in the top 10 so they could eat free this morning. Didn't quite happen, but an incredible run for the Tommy Baldwin 36 machine and Reed Sorensen. Tell you what, Reed Sorensen getting another shot with a little team that didn't expect a lot out of him at the Daytona 500. Really more expected something from his teammate, rather, in the form of Michael Annett. But Reed Sorensen running in the top 10, got shuffled on a late restart, running 4th with about 13 laps to go, I believe. Dale Earnhardt Jr. left him high and dry on the outside of the racetrack, but Reed Sorensen getting caught up in that crash, coming to the checkered flag, finished 16th, but that didn't tell the story of how he ran his day. He was in contention to win the Daytona 500 for a large portion of the final 50 laps. Checkered flag, Reed Sorensen. If Tommy Baldwin can get that pairing of Sorensen and Todd Parrott rolling, I think they could be a contender for some top 20 and top 15 finishes this season. Maybe not so much top 10s and wins, but a fuel strategy call. We know how good a crew chief Todd Parrott is. Not out of the question. So checkered flag, Reed Sorensen. Awesome run at the Daytona 500. My second checkered flag of Speed Weeks got to go actually not to a race that took place in Florida, but rather I'm going to give a checkered flag to the other side of the country out in Phoenix, to the Wild Horse Pass Motorsports Park NHRA drag race over the weekend, which we'll talk a little bit more about later in the program. But checkered flag to Alexis DeJoria, who becomes only the 4th female to ever win a NHRA funny car event and the 14th female in history to win an NHRA drag racing series race. DeJoria, in her first ever final round appearance, gets it done, and she took out in the semifinal number 1 qualifier John Force to do it. You don't win an NHRA race without A, being fast, but B, if you take out John Force, that validates everything right there. Congratulations, Alexis DeJoria. Incredible run out there in Phoenix. She gets my other checkered flag. Tom, I know we're just really getting warmed up on the good half of this segment. What have you got for checkered flags here tonight?
Well, first of all, you took my first checkered flag by lauding Reed Sorensen's performance, so I'm just going to tag along on that one. And huge checkered flag for that whole Tommy Baldwin Racing organization. That was a really cool thing to watch. Unfortunately, Michael Annett didn't have the Daytona 500 that he would have wanted to have, but I do suspect there are many better days coming for Michael Annett and that pilot team. But certainly good one, good race for Reed Sorensen, and welcome back to the NASCAR Sprint Cup Series in a pretty big way. I'm also going to just throw a question out there for us to ponder. This is not for discussion, just to ponder. I wonder if Richard Petty would have a black flag for John Force for getting beat by a girl. I will quickly move on now. My second checkered flag to Terry Labonte. Texas Terry ran his 32nd and final Daytona 500 last night and went out by leading some laps, looking good, and generally just having a nice race for himself. I got to tell you, this sport has been better for Terry and Bobby Labonte being in it. It is going to be sad to not see Terry at Daytona come 2015, along with, of course, we lost Mark Martin this year, was not at Daytona. Just another example of someone from the old guard, so to speak, finally deciding to step back a little bit. And I'm going to miss Terry Labonte out there on the racetrack and miss him around the circuit. Just truly one of the nicest gentlemen, and a driver who has been a champion both on and off the track in his life as well. So again, checkered flag to Terry Labonte and checkered flag to Reed Sorensen as well. Kyle, I'm going to pass to you now. I guess you're still in a bit of a foul mood. You got another black flag.
Tom, I'm going to continue the black flag streak to Daytona National Speedway, not from the rising section this time, but from the police and the traffic personnel yesterday and yesterday night. What an awful job, in my opinion, not only as a fan, but as a reporter. Getting in and out of Daytona National Speedway yesterday was complete chaos. I know it's the Daytona 500. I know there's a lot of people, but in past years, they've been able to get people out in 4 separate lanes. It's moved along at least decently from side to side. Awful job, in my opinion, by the track personnel yesterday, not only from the rising, but from the state police as well. It was not like that Friday and Saturday. The more people they got, the worse time they had. They could not figure it out. Final checkered flag coming around here to you. Brad Keselowski really become a great plate racer. He finished second Saturday in the nationwide race, top 5 on the 500. Had a shot to win it there with the final restart to the top side of Dale Earnhardt Jr. Brad Keselowski gets my final checkered flag of the night. Really coming around as a plate racer in the Sprint Cup and the nationwide series.
All right, I'm going to send it back to the Pikester here in a moment, but I've got 2 more flags. First, a checkered flag to Denny Hamlin, who did everything but sweep Speed Weeks. He won the Sprint Unlimited. He won his Budweiser Duel and finished second in the 500, comes as close as anyone ever has to sweeping all 3 races of Speed Weeks within 92 1,000ths of a second of making the sweep happen. Denny Hamlin, kudos to you, my friend. You are back with a vengeance, and I believe Denny Hamlin's going to be one to watch for this Sprint Cup championship. He's got the momentum. He feels as good as he has and has gotten the monkey off his back of not being competitive in my mind. Checkered flag Denny Hamlin. I know he was disappointed that he was not able to make that final move going into turn 3 for the win on Dale Earnhardt Jr., but a admirable effort nevertheless for Denny Hamlin. He gets a checkered flag from me, and I'm going to end my portion of this on a, I guess not necessarily a disheartening note, but I am ending it with a black flag because, unfortunately, my last black flag goes to a guy who was involved in 2 of the 3 big ones that plagued the second half of the Daytona 500. My black flag, last black flag of the evening, goes to Kevin Harvick. What were you thinking? Normally we say, where did he come from? But twice we saw Kevin Harvick get into other cars. He pushed Brian Scott up the racetrack coming into the Tri-Oval to spark that big wreck just past halfway that took out 15 cars, and then coming to the checkered flag, Harvick squeezes McMurray up into the wall and sparks another 9-car crash. Come on, Kevin, you're a better plate racer than that. You won the 07 500, you've won at Talladega. We've seen you do everything over the last couple years on the plate side, but not in this year's Daytona 500. Kevin Harvick gets a black flag from me for apparently just losing his head this year.
I'm going to disagree with that. I said the same thing originally on the first incident that Kevin Harvick, but after watching the replay, I think Brian Scott tagged his right rear just a little bit and got him loose. I think that's what started it. I would call that just kind of a typical plate racing deal. But I'm in favor of your black flag because I don't know what Kevin was doing after the checkered flag. I don't know what he was thinking with the second incident. That was clearly all Kevin Harvick, and that's rather unfortunate. And again, Kevin was one that we all thought might be racing for the win at the end. Definitely didn't work out that way. But I'm gonna go on record as just saying I'm not sure that Kevin was the trigger point for the first wreck, but regardless, still definitely not a typical Kevin Harvick performance in that one.
No, not at all. And we're going to take a 15-second pause for station identification after that one. When we come back, we're going to wrap up the World Series of Speedway Racing with Kyle Souza. And then we'll have more from around the world of motorsports. You're listening to Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. We'll be right back. I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, Kyle Souza, James Pike. Around the round table, Stephen Ovens going to be joining us very shortly to wrap up the Dirt Car Nationals from Florida. But first, we're going to wrap up the World Series of Asphalt Stock Car Racing from New Smyrna Speedway with Kyle Souza. Kyle, you were down in Florida for the better part of this week, and certainly you've been following the World Series since its beginning a little over a week ago now, almost a week and a half ago now. Time's flown quickly, but a very interesting conclusion to the World Series of Speedway Racing at New Smyrna, and a couple of surprise winners on the final night.
Yeah, Jacob, an interesting week. Not only from the modified portion, from the late model portion as well. Not getting to New Smyrna myself because I was stuck at Daytona with the duels, the truck, the Nationwide, and the 500 yesterday in the rain, but hearing from what went on and seeing a couple of things on the internet and talking to a couple of people at Daytona yesterday that were there, it seemed like the start of the week was the idea of Ronnie Silk in the modifieds, in the end Justin Bonsignore, the middle, there was a couple of people slid there. From the start of it looked like Ronnie Silk was going to have the car to beat all of Speed Weeks, at least World Series Speed Weeks down there at New Smyrna. He was challenged by Ryan Preece a lot. Preece actually went in to the final night with an advantage in the point standings for the modified portion. Silk won the championship for the mod tour type portion at New Smyrna, but the last two nights were dominated by car number 51 of Justin Bonsignore. Bonsignore ran Tuesday at the Battle at the Beach, had a motor problem in that one, so was not able to take the checkered flag out on the racetrack, but instead he goes over to New Smyrna, takes the win on Friday night out there, and then on Saturday night he decides he's going to win the Richie Evans Memorial 100, which is a thrill and the biggest modified race that you could see down there at New Smyrna to wrap things up, the 100 lapper that pretty much went green to checker. Couple of the races at the end of the week after Tom and Jacob, we spoke about this past week, the instances between Jimmy Zacharias and J.R. Bertuccio, a couple of races down there this week where drivers seemed like they lost their head, but when it came down to run for the big money and the big laps, these guys put their head on straight, they ran strong, and Justin Bonsignore was just at the head of the pack when it was all said and done.
Yeah, he was, Kyle, and I was really impressed with the strength Justin Bonsignore showed coming around to New Smyrna after he ran at Daytona and really putting on a clinic of how to drive that half-mile racetrack. So my hat's off to Justin Bonsignore, who wins that Richie Evans Memorial for the first time in his career. Want to give a shout-out to Kyle Benjamin as well, who couldn't hardly have anything go right in his World Series of Asphalt Racing, but when it came crunch time for the final Super Late Model event in their 100 lapper, Kyle Benjamin puts it out front and puts it in victory lane. Doesn't win the overall Super Late Model Championship. That went to Steve Wallace after Stephen Nasse got caught up in a crash on the final night. So unfortunate end to Stephen Nasse's World Series Speed Weeks. He had a really good Super Late Model the entire time, won 3 of the events down there, but Steve Wallace, on consistency and a couple of wins nevertheless, goes to victory lane and the title in the Super Late Model division. Spencer Davis winning the Pro Late Model World Series title, so hats off to him as well. Kyle, World Series is over, and the best part about that is we get to focus on tour racing now coming up here in about a month.
Yeah, Jacob, we're set for tour racing that is quickly approaching. We are now in the middle of the end of February, so now we got one more week here of February, if not less than that now, since this month is less than 31 days, which is interesting to state that we only have one full month before we head to the icebreaker for the Northern Tour, Southern Tour to Caraway to open the season. These guys are set for modified tour type racing. K&N's going to get started up pretty soon. We're going to have past Super Late Models touring around New England. Up here, at least down there, you guys are going to have the Southern Tour, the Pass South. Everybody's getting ready. The touring race is right around the corner. We're, I'd say, just about a month away from the first green flags flowing. I know for the modifieds up here at the Icebreaker. Before that, the Millennium Modified Racing Series is Waterford. We're just about a month away from all the action to kick off up here in New England and down there in the South. Tour racing is once again back, and we're glad to have it here in the Northeast.
Actually, the Pass South Tour starts this weekend at Dillon Motor Speedway. I'm planning to be there for that if Mother Nature cooperates. So it's all starting up. Starts here in the South first, and when you guys get through chilling out and snowing up there in the north, which I know usually isn't until about, May 1st, you'll be running some shows up there too.
Yeah, the snow is actually, as you mentioned that, unfortunately we have a storm that's coming in on Wednesday that could drop up to 7 inches of snow, so we won't mention that, but hopefully that holds off. The snow is going to end soon. We're going to be blasting off with the Valenti Mod Series. We're going to be blasting off with the Modified Racing Series, and we are just about set to get the, at least the Northern Tour portion going. Southern Tour headed towards Caraway. These touring series get exciting, well, even more exciting every year. The young talent continues to grow, especially in the Northern Tour without Mike Stefanik and Ted Christopher. What lies ahead? Young talent, ladies and gentlemen, is coming up as this mod portion of the program continues over just now a month away. These touring series are back.
That's right, they are. And as Tom said, the Pass South opener this weekend at Dillon, and next weekend, actually a week from Sunday, is the season opener for the Whelen Southern Modified Tour at Caraway. It's all heating up, and we'll follow that even more on Thursday nights on the Stock Car Steel SRI Motorsports show, where Tom Baker, Kyle Souza, and myself will break down all the latest from the worlds of late models, modifieds, K&M Pro Series, and much, much more. That's the Stock Car Steel SRI Motorsports show every Thursday night at 7 p.m. right here on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, Stephen Ovens is in the house to talk the Dirt Car Nationals from Florida Speed Weeks. And we've got even more news and notes from around the world of motorsports. It's Motorsports Madness on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. Back with more after this.
Steven, do you like dirt modifieds and sprint cars?
I sure do, Clint, but I like full fenders and late models too. Whoa. What about the super modifieds up at the Steel Palace?
You can find all of those and more with driver interviews on the Turn 5 Racing Podcast, released weekly on YouTube.com, Podbean.com, and on iTunes. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at Turn 5 Podcast. Turn 5 is a proud partner of Race Chaser Online and Speed77 Radio. Search Turn 5 Racing Podcast.
Every Saturday you wake up and wonder, is this going to be it? Is this going to be the day? The day it all clicks. The day you break through. The day you stand out above the rest. The day everyone remembers who you are. The day you stop wondering if you belong here. Is this going to be the day?
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed77 Radio and RaceChaserOnline.com. Jacob Seelman, Tom Baker, James Pike around the round table, joined now by Stephen Ovens as we get set to talk and wrap up the Dirt Car Nationals from Florida Speed Weeks. And Stephen, we saw a little bit of everything between the Volusia Speedway Park and the Bubba Raceway Park in Ocala, Florida. We saw World of Outlaws sprint cars, late models, the Super Dirt Car Series, the UMP Dirt Modified Series. This is a feast of racing for any motorsports fan in the state of Florida throughout February, but talk about dirt fans having their fill. There was racing just about every night for 2 straight weeks, and certainly a lot to talk about from the state of Florida.
Absolutely, and if you even just look at, Kenny Wallace's Twitter feed throughout the whole week. I mean, that guy ran a lot of races, and when they got down toward the end of the week, race fans were asking him, "Hey, Kenny, why didn't we see you here or there?" And he goes, "I just got done racing almost 2 weeks worth of races, and I've had my fill for the week." But yeah, a lot of action. You look at the sprint cars. when the Dirt Car Nationals hit Volusia, some pretty strong guys picking up wins. I mean, just to name a few, you had Donnie Schatz pulled down a win, and hey, that guy, the King, Steve Kinzer, got a win. We talked about that last week. But what we were really looking forward to watching was the Super Dirt Car Series, Big Block Modifieds. They kicked off their season, and on night number 1, just an awesome race. Justin Hares picks up career win number 1 on the series. Justin's been running years up here, up in the Northeast, mainly here in the Finger Lakes in Central New York, and to drive all the way down to Florida and get his first series win, what a race! And we talked to him on the podcast tonight, and had a lot of good things to say, and he is ready for the 2014 season.
Yeah, I know it was a very exciting race that Justin Hares won. We will clarify there that win will not officially go down in the win list, though it will be credited to him as his first career victory. Just not a points-paying win, Stephen, because the Super Dirt Cars do not pay points for the Volusia races, unlike the World of Outlaws Late Model Series and Sprint Cars.
Yeah, and we talked to him about all of that. It's like, he goes, I got my gator, and that's what I came down here to do. And of course, and Tom will appreciate this, when guys go down to Volusia, they say that they got to get a gator, and they're not talking about the newspaper.
Well played, Steven. Yeah, that's exactly right. For those of you who don't know what Gator Racing News is, just do a Google search. It's a fantastic racing trade paper from up in the Northeast in the New York, Pennsylvania area, and that's what Steven's referring to. Very good, Steven. That gets the attaboy for the night.
The other thing that we wanted to talk about tonight, guys, was the fact that Stuart Friesen came out on night 2 and just mowed everybody over. He was in a different zip code than everybody else was. He was just he was off the chart.
He was on a rail for sure.
Yeah, and then Matt Shepard picking up the win at night 3 in the new HBR car, who actually they picked up speed every night out. Stuart Friesen got up to second in that one, which I didn't realize till tonight that he had a pit stop halfway through the race and got back up to second. So that's
a pretty incredible run. And of course that finale there is 50 laps, and Friesen comes in roughly about halfway through, throws on a right rear sneaker, out he comes, and got himself up to second. But Matt Shepard and Jimmy Phelps, being teammates there at HBR, fought it out there until Stewart came up and started dicing it up with them, and really strong outing for that HBR team. Only took Matt Shepard 3 races, and he got his first win in a Troyer.
Yeah, an impressive win by Matt Shepard in that final event. But, Steven, I want to ask you, because I'm really shocked. We expected the champ, Brett Hearn, to go down and at least pick up one Gator over the course of the Dirt Car Nationals, and instead we see 3 nights of racing, a 4th night rained out due to weather on, I believe it was Friday night that was rained out. But incredible that Brett Hearn goes down 3 races, no victories to show for it.
No, and that was something that we talked, another guest of ours on the show tonight, Shane Andrews, who is the voice of the Super Dirt Car Series and the voice up here in the Finger Lakes. Yeah, I mean, Brett Hearn, we're accustomed to him going down and, ho-hum, picking up a couple of victories down in Florida. And, they kind of ran in the, the mid top 10s and just not the normal Brett Hearn we're used to seeing. But trust me when I tell you, that's not going to faze him a bit.
Yeah, he had a lot of trouble just catching the rookie Anthony Perego, who will make a name for himself this year running a big block.
You betcha. He was quick all week long down there in Florida. I think they named him the super rookie. He really turned some heads down there right from Tuesday night's practice night all the way through the rest of the week. And that's a guy we've talked about up here that won the Gobbler back in the last race that possibly been run in New York State back in November.
Yep.
Remember the name Anthony Perego. You're going to hear it a lot this season.
Yeah, that was actually his first race in a big block, I believe.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Remember that name.
Going to be really interesting. Steven, I do also want to touch on the UMP dirt modifieds that ran at Volusia Speedway Park during the Dirt Car Nationals. You want to talk about a modified series that runs on the dirt that was all but dominated. Look no further than the UMP series. Austin and Ty Dillon, between the two of them, winning 5 out of 7 feature events for the UMP modifieds over the course of the Dirt Car Nationals, and Ty Dillon, when it's all said and done, wins that Dirt Car National Points Championship. He takes home a big gator, and I believe when I counted them, including the championship gator that Ty Dillon's bringing home, 6 gators overall going back to Team Dillon Racing. They wanted to elevate that dirt program for 2014. I'd say the Dillon boys have done it.
Yeah, without a doubt. And actually, Austin and Ty, they swapped the lead on. There was a couple nights where they swapped the lead back and forth. Kenny Wallace was up there for a while. Austin Dillon actually won on the night that he got the pole for the 500.
Yep.
So they did step up their dirt program, and they just got to show you that those boys can race pretty much whatever you put them in, and they're going to be a force to reckon with all year long.
Looking forward now, guys, because now we really get into the meat and potatoes of the dirt season. We finished the Florida swing, and now we really get into it. The Outlaws are going out west for a 2-month western swing that starts in California and goes across 5 or 6 different states. Actually, I take that back. Starts in Las Vegas this year. Used to start in California. But the Super Dirt Car Series is going to be off for a couple months. We've seen the Florida races and how they've turned out, but can we really paint a picture of what this big block season is going to look like in 2014 based on the 3 races we saw during the Dirt Car Nationals, or is it too early to tell who the favorite could be for this Dirt Car Championship in 2014?
Well, I think there's certainly some things that you're going to be able to take from this year's Dirt Car Nationals. One thing we talked about was how is this newly reorganized HBR team going to fare out? I think those guys prove that they're going to be contenders for the title. I think Justin Harris showed that, a guy who runs weekly at one of the weekly tracks here in Central New York, those guys can still compete with the Brett Hearns and the Matt Shepards and the Jimmy Phelps of the world. I was really impressed with that run that he had down there. I was impressed by the Perego kid. And oh, by the way, there's this guy up here named Stuart Friesen. I'm not sure if you've heard his name before, but he showed down there in Florida that I'm still here, guys. I ain't going anywhere, and I'm going to be here to contend.
My question about Friesen is, though, does he run all the Super Dirt Series shows, or does he bounce?
He generally does run the series.
Okay.
You'll see him. I mean, the thing with Stewart is he will run several different series. You'll see him on the Big Block Super Dirt Car Series. You'll see him on the Race of Champions Modified Series.
ESS Modified 600.
ES Empire Super Sprints. I mean, anything the guy can get his keister into, he'll sit down and drive the wheels off it. So Stuart Friesen will be certainly a guy to keep your eye out for.
One guy that didn't make the show or didn't go down to Florida, Billy Dunn.
Yeah, for sure.
And that makes sense now, Tom, I didn't realize that they don't get any dirt car points, so that would understand why they didn't have the time to go down to Florida. It wasn't that big a deal because they can still run the series, and they didn't lose any points for not going. So
it's going to be really, really interesting, guys. And like you mentioned, Billy Dunn not making the trip, so we really don't know what he's capable of yet for 2014. But obviously, we've seen good things out of Matt Shepard. He's not had any layover period with that new Hanky Baldwin team. Shepard going to be a force. Of course, Brett Hearn, even though he didn't get a win, going to be a force to be reckoned with, guys. We appreciate you coming on, as always, from the Turn 5 podcast. And For those fans out there who may not know where to find you guys, talk a little bit real quick about where they can find the Turn 5 podcast online.
Well, you can find us on Facebook. Look up Turn 5 Racing Podcast. We also post to iTunes. You can subscribe there at Turn 5 Racing Podcast. And we post the show weekly on YouTube. Again, search Turn 5 Racing Podcast. We post there every Tuesday morning. Our show comes out. And if you go to iTunes, you can usually get it a little bit quicker than on the YouTube channel. But that's where you can find us. You can also find us on the Twitter at Turn 5 Podcast.
Steve, I got to give you some good here. I'm throwing 2 checkered flags your way tonight. One for the Gotta Get a Gator double entendre. You got a double word score on that one. And the other one for the use of the word keister. I don't think I've heard the word keister used in media form since Ronald Reagan used it in a news conference back in the 80s.
Oh, yes, we do enjoy ourselves. And, you know, if you're going to use the word keister, you've got to let the guy use it who named his studio the Casa de Pork Chop Studios.
That's right, yes. There is only one Casa de Pork Chop, and we all know where that is. And for the public, we ain't telling.
And on that note, we're going to take another caution flag here on the madness. This is why we call it such. All these guys are a little bit insane when it comes down to it. It's a good thing we haven't painted the studio walls white yet. That could really be scary. We'll be back right after this. We'll have more news and notes from around the motorsports world, and we'll talk some V8 supercars here on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. Stay with us.
For 17 years, Stock Car Steel has been a leading materials supplier to the racing industry. We're proud they're a motorsports content partner here at Race Chaser Online. The biggest names in NASCAR trust Stock Car Steel for raw materials such as carbon steel, chrome moly, DOM, aluminum, plastics, and much more. You can't build a race car without the basic materials, and Stock Car Steel is the place to get them. Don't forget to also visit Stock Car Steel's sister company, SRI Supplies, for racing and industry. SRI is the place to go for all your shop supply needs. Nuts, bolts, rivets, tapes, adhesives, cutting tools, chemicals, body shop supplies, paint shop supplies, lubricants, and more. A well-stocked race shop is a winning race shop, and the path to winning begins with 3 letters, SRI. For more information, visit stockcarsteel.com or SRI-supplies.com. Check them both out on Facebook or call them toll-free at 1-888-752-7272, 1-888-752-7272.
For every turn, a twist. For every start, an untimely finish. For every win, someone who loses it. For every number, a nation. For every celebration, a brawl. For every split second, years of work. For every heaven, a hell. For every good old boy, a good old girl. For every curse, a prayer. For every ounce of order, a jug of chaos. For every twist, there's a turn.
I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports. Welcome back to Motorsports Madness here on Speed77 Radio and RaceChaserOnline.com. Jacob Seelman, James Pike, and Tom Baker around the round table. And before we get into all that Australian stuff, James, we're going to hold off on warming up the Bobby for just a minute. We got some other news and notes that have hit the wire from around the world of motorsports and RaceChaserOnline.com for that matter today as well that we want to talk about here on the show. And Tom, this first bit that I want to talk about is out of the open wheel dirt world, and it was one that completely took me off guard when it was announced this morning. When reached by phone today, Christopher Bell. We talked with him a couple weeks ago on the Madness, the 2013 USAC National Midget Championship. He had branched out into running some sprint car races this season for CH Motorsports, the team that Tim Schaefer drove for in 2013. Well, when reached by phone this morning, Chris Bell announced he had parted ways after just a couple of races down in Florida with that CH Motorsports team. Really shocking twist in that saga. Bell still saying he's going to run the full USAC National Midget and Silver Crown schedules, but I was shocked when I heard this morning because that CH Motorsports operation has won 4 straight All-Star Circuit of Champion Sprint Car Series titles in that 83 team, with Tim Schaefer being the 2013 champion on that series. Chris Bell, good equipment, but after a couple races, calls it quits.
Yeah, it was strange. You know, you don't often see a team get together before the start of a season and then fall apart so quickly. So, methinks that there is more to the story, which we will probably never know, and that's probably okay.
Probably, you're right. So there's the story on Chris Bell. He'll open his season with the USAC National Midget Series coming up as March gets ready to get here. NHRA Drag Racing Series action over the weekend from Phoenix, and boy, was it a history-making weekend in the funny car front. As I mentioned in my checkered flag segment, Alexis DeJoria taking down the rest of the funny car field to go to victory lane for the first time in her NHRA funny car career. First final round appearance ever for Alexis DeJoria, and she puts the Tequila Patron machine in the winner's circle, grabs a Wally. Alan Johnson wins in Pro Stock. The defending champion Antron Brown goes back to victory lane in Top Fuel. Brown, the 2012 champion, he beat Brittany Force in the final round to win that one. So it was girl power all the way around in the NHRA world. Brittany Force, Tom, you know, a lot of people questioned John Force when he said he was starting a Top Fuel team for Brittany. And her results, really, we didn't think were that impressive the first couple of passes she made in her Top Fuel career, but she's slowly gotten better and better and better, and all of a sudden, she's in a final round. The Force blood just keeps on rolling.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, they're like this family of the NHRA series these days, and it's great. I mean, John Force is just all you can say about John Force is that the guy is just a classic. You know, there's just he is so unique and you know, always full of quotes. And boy, one of the best ever, if not the best ever in drag racing. And I would say that both Force daughters just doing very, very well at this point. Yeah, you're right. Brittany's come a long way. It's good to see her making progress, and you know, always fun to see the Force family doing well.
Yeah, it is. And Alexis DeJoria, just to note, raced her way past in the final round Del Worsham, I believe it was, to go to the winner's circle. An incredible, or no, rather, she raced past Jeff Arend earlier in the race. Yes. I keep that keeps throwing me off. She raced past Jeff Arend, who's driving Del Worsham's former car, raced past Del Worsham, who's driving Del Worsham's current car, and actually her final round opponent was Robert Height, who was another one of those John Force racing cars. I tell you what, these trees and countdowns and all this stuff, NHRA might be the most convoluted system of any major American motorsports, but you got to admit it's the most fun to watch.
It's, yeah, no doubt. As the great short track legend Bentley Warren would say, it's just confusing.
Anytime we can get a Bentley Warren reference in a show, it is a successful show right there. That just validates the whole night. So, NHRA action, and An announcement out of the sports car world. Unfortunate announcement as it may be, James. I want to talk to you about this one because you and I kept an eye on this all the way through the Rolex 24, and we were hoping this was not going to be the case before we got to Sebring, but announced earlier today that Bob Stallings Racing, the Gainesco Red Dragon 99, going to withdraw from the remainder of the Tudor United Sports Car Championship season. They'll suspend operations and look to come back in 2015. Going to focus on their driver Mamo Gidley's full recovery. They have released their drivers for this season to look for work, but hoping to have both John Fogerty and Alex Gurney back in the fold for 2015 with the rest of their cast, but just going to be unfortunate not to see that Red Dragon on the sports car circuit in 2014 because they've been so loyal over the years. Won a couple of Grand Am championships, have been on the podium numerous times. Just a whole unfortunate situation.
Yeah, that's one of the most likable teams in the Tudor United Sports Car Championship because they do things the right way, and it's just a really great operation with a bunch of good people behind it. So I think it speaks volumes that they're going to sit this out about just how vulnerable even the top guys can be in the series and just how much they want to see Mamo get back to health. They're definitely going to keep an eye on him over the course of this season, and I have no doubt that they're going to come back in 2015 with Mamo behind the wheel and hopefully do some damage. But in the meantime, you've got two free agents now, John Fogerty and Alex Gurney, that are really, really, really big names. And if anybody can get them, they're going to be some really big pickups for a team in the Tudor United Sports Car Championship because they know how to get it done.
Yeah, they are, and I don't think you see those two go anywhere that they're split up. I think those two, honestly, are a package deal because they drive so well off of each other's driving styles. It's going to be interesting to see where they land for 2014 because you know they're going to want to contend. But meanwhile, James, one other bit of news that came across the wire before we get to your V8 Supercars stuff. I know I'm putting you off here just for a second, but this one's big. Out of the world of the IndyCar series, Sam Schmidt Motorsports set to announce on Wednesday their second pilot for the Indianapolis 500, and in the press conference announcement, they used the wording Major Motorsports Champion to describe the driver that they've selected for the 2014 Indianapolis 500. Now, Joel Sebastianelli, who will be back with us on the Madness next Monday night, never fear, race fans, and I were talking about this earlier today, and we just seriously thought that that's too... I don't know what you call it, too either vague or too over the top, per se, for an former IndyCar champion. And where did Joel's and my minds immediately go? Kurt Busch.
Bingo!
Yeah, that could be a lot of fun to see if Kurt Busch does end up being the pilot of that Sam Schmidt machine. I think... in somewhere in our minds, and maybe in his mind too, he'll have a goal of trying to rewrite his own history at Indianapolis so that the most memorable moment we have of him there is not giving Jimmy Spencer a good shot of his backside when they got together in 2002, but he could be one to watch when we get to the gigantic, colossal structure that is IMS come May.
I love the idea of Kurt Busch running Indy, and I was waiting to see which team might put him in a car. I would never have expected it to be a Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports entry, though. Thought sure that probably Andretti Autosport would come up with a team for him, but going to be interesting, Jacob, to see if this is in fact the announcement. And that was my thought after I read it. I was hoping that you might have had some more definitive information than what I was able to glean this afternoon, but maybe we could put a sneak preview out there. But certainly this is going to be an interesting announcement. If it is Kurt Busch, I think social media will be an awful lot of fun to watch come that afternoon.
2 words. You think? I agree with you, though. I never never dreamed that Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports might be where Kurt Busch would land, particularly because they're a Honda-powered team now. Chevrolet was very vocal about them wanting Kurt to run a Chevy-powered machine at the Indianapolis 500, but, you know, and with Andretti Autosport running Honda motors, Chip Ganassi switched over to Chevy power this season. They were in the mix, but to see Kurt in a Honda-powered Sam Schmidt-owned car at the Indy 500, boy, wouldn't that be a story if Sam Schmidt, the driver who was struck paraplegic back in an open-wheel crash in the early 2000s, and Kurt Busch combined forces to win the Indy 500. I don't even think Hollywood could write that script.
Well, I'm not ready to. I'm not going to suggest that Kurt Busch would be a heavy favorite to win the Indy 500. I certainly think it would be good just to, if he could qualify and make the race. I just think it'd be a great story. And I really, again, I've made my feelings known on this show about the fact that I think that sort of cross-pollination idea, it's time for that to come back with NASCAR guys running the Indy 500 and vice versa, even having a couple of the IndyCar guys be able to come over and run the Coke 600 and just kind of do some of that back and forth sort of stuff. It'd be good for IndyCar and good for NASCAR as well, and great for the fans, because that was a treat that I was fortunate enough to be able to see a lot in the 70s, and early 80s, and really right up until, the end of the Tony Stewart days, Danica Patrick too. But that's definitely an interesting thing to watch. Now, again, let's clarify for those of you listening to us, we don't know that this is going to be Kurt Busch, that's what the announcements be, but it certainly would lend itself to looking like that.
It does lend itself to looking like that, and I guarantee you, a week from tonight on The Madness, we'll have Joel Sebastianelli back, and whatever the announcement is, he'll be very vocal about it. Joel's always vocal about open-wheel stuff.
That's why we like him.
That is why we like him, and that's why we'll have him back for Open Wheel Central next Monday. Right now, we're going to take a 15-second pause for station identification, our final break of the evening, and when we come back, we're going to go down under for V8 Supercars preview. It's the Clipsal 500 coming up this weekend, and our one and only expert, James Pike, going to put on his Australian sunglasses and take us to work for V8 Supercar coverage. That's next, right after these words on Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. I'm Jacob Seelman.
And I'm Tom Baker.
You're listening to Speed77 Radio,
powered by Race Chaser Online.
We are your home for motorsports.
Alrighty, fans, welcome back to the Madness, Motorsports Madness here on Speed77 Radio. If you don't know me, I'm James Pike, and I will take over this final segment of the show tonight to preview the season opening event for the Australian V8 Supercars Championship. As NASCAR got their season underway at Daytona, fans down under have been looking forward to the next weekend after the Daytona race, because they know that that's their time for their favorite stars and sons of Australia's finest racing series to get going again. And before we even touch the event that's going to take place in Adelaide, let's take a moment to go over some of the major changes that the teams and the drivers have gone through in the off-season. We'll start with the biggest change as far as manufacturers are concerned. Gary Rogers Motorsport, famous for running those Fujitsu Holden Commodores, has made a jump to factory support from Volvo and has picked up primary sponsorship from Valvoline, so they'll be running under the Valvoline Racing GRM banner for 2014.
FYI,
also,
beautiful cars.
Yes, absolutely beautiful cars in that Polestar blue. I have debated whether or not I'm going to pick up a die-cast version of one of those. I very well may, just because they look that pretty, and I may or may not drive a Volvo myself on a regular basis, so there's a little bit of a personal bit in there for me as well. But also on the docket, James Rosenberg Racing, one of the REC teams, ended its association with Airbus Motorsport. You remember they ran that third car, the 47 with Tim Slade, sponsorship from Heavy Haulage Australia last year. They jump over and become a customer of Walkinshaw Racing, and they're going to run a second car, which will be piloted as the number 222 by Nick Percat. Former Holden Racing Team co-driver, won the Bathurst 2000 in 2011 with Garth Tander. He'll get his first crack at a full-time V8 Supercars ride this year. No sponsorship for that car yet, but they're looking actively as we speak. Hopefully they'll get something lined up for this weekend and the races to come. Also, Lucas Dumbrell Motorsport is going to scale back to a single-car operation this year, and we are going to go to one car for them. Going to have Russell Engel behind the wheel of a car. He'll come over from Walkinshaw Racing. Could be a fun one, Jacob, I think. He got a really, really good run in there with Super Cheap Auto. Did some stuff with that Walkinshaw car that you don't think you'd see on an everyday basis. Definitely had them running above their potential. You think he could do something with Lucas Dumbrell in 2014?
Oh boy, it's really tough to say because I don't think we've seen exactly what he's been able to do over the last season or so. I mean, they call him the enforcer for a reason, James. He's got the potential, and we know he's got the driving talent. It's just going to be really interesting to see what he can do with that Dumbrell operation. We've not seen them be fantastic, but we've not seen them be completely horrid either. It's just, I think if he can get out of the gate strong here with the Clipsal 500, if he can start some positive momentum early, I think he's definitely a contender for some top finishes over the course of the year. But it's just too early to tell until we see how that operation rolls off the grid for race 1.
I think it was very telling when the most TV time they got last year was when Dean Fiore almost flipped in the final race at Hidden Valley. There was that big first lap crash that took out almost a third of the field. So definitely going to look to improve on that this year, will the LDM guys. Also, Tony D'Alberto Racing has shut up shop, could not find a sponsor for 2014. Their car is actually the chassis that Walkinshaw Racing picked up for Nick Percat. So that second car is the old Tony D'Alberto car, if you're keeping track. Also, that means that D'Alberto will not be running in 2014. And that will also give us a chance to look at some of the driver changes that are going to come in here and be in play for this new season. I think the biggest of such, there are two that really jump out at my mind. Will Davidson leaves that 6 car at FPR, the second operation behind Mark Winterbottom, one of the top teams in the sport. He'll go over to Erebus Motorsport and be the number 1 driver in the Citizen Watch Mercedes. Very interesting move, I think, because Erebus did not have a great season in 2013. Really struggled to get out of the gate, had lots of mechanical gremlins and issues, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what he does. What do you think, Jacob? Do you think that Will might be able to really put in some good performances for Erebus? Can he match the performances that he put in with FPR a season ago?
I don't like this move. I don't like this move at all. I feel like for Will, it's a big step backwards. We know with FPR, he was up front, a contender almost week in and week out. For sure, you'd see that machine in the top 5. He had a proven teammate in Mark Winterbottom, and that tandem was very, very dangerous in the right circumstances. Erebus has been so inconsistent as far as results, and they've struggled somewhat, I feel like, in 2013, that I just feel like they don't have anything going right for them coming into 2014. And I think for Will Davison, it's going to be a really, really rough start to this year, moving over to Erebus. I could be wrong. He could buoy that entire operation, but I don't see it in the cards based on the way they ran 2013.
I think the way they ran 2013, he'll almost have to buoy the operation. But at the same time, it was such a struggle for them last year, but there really isn't anywhere to go but up for them. So we'll keep an eye out for those Mercedes and see if they can have a better season this time around than they did a year ago. Now, coming into Will's old seat at FPR for Performance Racing is a very, very talented kid by the name of Chaz Mostert. C-H-A-Z, yes, it is a Z at the end of that. But he actually signed with FPR in 2013 and got contracted out to run one of the Wilson security cars for Dick Johnson Racing over the second half of the season. FPR has touted this kid for a long, long time as the next big, Jamie Whincup, Craig Lyons, and Australian motorsport. So, Jacob, what do you think about him? Can Chaz step out of the gate and really wow people in his debut in the main flight, as they call it down there?
Oh, boy. I've been high on Chaz over the last couple of seasons in the V8 Supercar ranks, and I was really happy last year when he got signed with FPR, even though they contracted him out to the Dick Johnson Racing stable. I feel like this is Chaz's shot in proven equipment. He was decent last year, not light the world on fire, but I feel like he's got a lot of driving potential. He's going to be paired up alongside Mark Winterbottom, I believe, James, for this 2014 season, and we know that Winterbottom's very capable of mentoring the other drivers in that stable. Winterbottom, a proven voice on the V8 Supercar Tour. I feel like there's a lot of good pieces in place for Mostert for 2014 to really make a step up. I see him challenging for a couple wins this year.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is that Chaz is going to be in top flight equipment. With nothing against Johnson Racing, their cars aren't the strongest in the series. Now that he's going to be in some top level equipment, he'll be able to come up there, and I'm with you on that. I think that Chaz will definitely be in the hunt for a few wins. I look at Phillip Island as a place where he could run really well out. He had a great run with DJR there last year in the penultimate round of the championship. So definitely keep an eye out on that six. Some big things could be coming from him, maybe in this season. I think definitely in the years to come. Some of the smaller moves here. We already talked about Russell Engel going to Lucas Dumbrell Racing from Walkinshaw. In his place will come Tim Slade. Tim Slade is going to take over the Super Cheap Auto Machine and be the lead driver over at Walkinshaw Racing. Scott Pye and David Wall jumped from Lucas Dumbrell Motorsport and Brytech Motorsport, respectively, both to DJR, so they'll take over the rides of the Wilson Security cars. Tim Blatchard out, Chaz Mostert obviously going on to FPR, those two drivers taking the reins of those cars last year. And then Jonathan Webb could not find funding for 2014 and decided to fookus on the business operations of things, so he shut up his 91 car, and it will be a one-car effort. The 47 VIP Pet Foods car of Shane Van Gisbergen, who incidentally is the defending champion of the Sunday race for this weekend at Clipsal. So one car from Techno, and we'll see what Shane can do in 2014. And also Dale Wood, the reigning Dunlop Series champion, going to be in the Brytech Motorsport machine, also known as the third Brad Johnson racing car. And he's another guy I want to ask you about, Jacob, because we've seen this kind of trend as of late where the Dunlop Series champion from the year prior comes in and steps in and really does something in the V8 Supercars Championship. You look at Scott McLaughlin, the 2011 champion, had a great season last year, or 2012 champion, had a great season in his first year with Gary Rogers Motorsports. So what do you think about Dale? Can Dale do anything this year for the boys at BJR?
I think the potential's there. He ran very, very well in the Dunlop Series in 2013, and I feel like he comes in on very much riding a wave of momentum into the 2014 schedule. I just think it depends on whether he gets off on the right foot or not. If he can keep the momentum from his 2013 season rolling and really get a couple of, maybe not necessarily light the world on fire runs, but a couple of solid, consistent runs in the books to start 2014, I feel like he can definitely be a threat for some top runs in the second half of the season. I just really think a lot of it's going to come down to the competition. The competition in the full-on V8 Supercar ranks is much, much greater, much, much higher than the Dunlop Series, so it's going to be interesting. But yeah, I think if the momentum is there and he can get some solid runs early, that it could be a very solid season. Of course, James, you're talking about a lot of driver changes. I know one team that's not changing, Jamie Whincup.
Yeah. Red Bull Racing Australia is going to come back just as they were in 2013. It's going to be Jamie Whincup and Craig Lowndes behind the wheel. And Jamie Whincup and Craig Lowndes are definitely two of the favorites to win because now I think we can actually talk about Clipsal. We've covered all the changes that took place over the offseason, so why not? Let's dig into it. Back at the Adelaide Street Circuit to open up the season, however, with a new format for 2014. Instead of the traditional doubleheader of the weekend with two 70-lap, 250-kilometer long races, we're going to have a little bit of a different format this year. We're going to have two races on Saturday. They're going to be 35 laps and 125 kilometers long each. And we're going to have one of those starting in twilight for the first time ever. So going to get to see how this track runs as a little bit cooler place. You think it might be a little bit more grippy, might be a little bit easier to drive maybe, or could be trickier. We'll see if the sun and the sun setting plays a factor in how the race plays out. Now, Adelaide in and of itself is a tricky street circuit. There isn't a lot of room, especially coming out of turn 8. That's the one big famous turn that I think the average fan needs to keep an eye out for. You got cars that come in there kind of halfway through the back straight at almost 155 miles an hour, and they just go trying to fly through there, carry all their speed as they go down into turn 11. And it can be tricky because that corner narrows up a lot. And Jacob, as we've seen in the past few years, if you don't get the exit of turn 8 right, you can end up spun out like Will Davison did last year. You can end up running it into the wall like we saw multiple cars do in multiple seasons past. It's a tricky place. You have to make sure that you get through there if you want to have a shot to win this thing.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm sitting here looking at this with one of those 225K events starting in the twilight. You don't think the V8 Supercars took a lesson from NASCAR here from over the weekend and think, hey, NASCAR ran in prime time. Why don't we do it? Let's see how it works out.
Yeah, they haven't run in prime time, the V8 Supercars, for a long time. How about 1997 at Calder Park, the last race that the V8 Supercars ran under the lights? So, yeah, I think they've definitely taken a cue from NASCAR and some of the other series. I think F1 at Abu Dhabi is another prime time race that really draws the eyes of folks around the world. And they said, you know what? We can do it too. So, as for guys beyond Jamie and Craig that should be favorites to win this race, I think really this is a track that suits the strong drivers of the series. These street circuits tend to bring out the strengths and weaknesses of all the teams, and it's not really one that evens the field like a Daytona or Talladega does to NASCAR. It's really the consistent guys, the regulars up front that you see that usually end up having the most success here. So, you look at Jamie Whincup, 7-time winner here. Craig Lowndes, who got his first win since 1999 here last year in the Saturday race, as guys to look at. Garth Tander is a multiple-time winner here at Adelaide. Will Davison got a win in this race on Saturday 2 years ago. Those guys really are going to head the list. However, that next bit of guys, that next group, you got Chaz Mostert in that 6. He's got the old car that Will Davison had a few years back. And then one guy, Jacob, that I think is really interesting and is going to be a guy to watch for all weekend, James Courtney. Fans will remember that James Courtney got caught up in a wreck, got T-boned at Phillip Island in the penultimate weekend of the season, and nearly got shattered and caught in that car. It was a very scary wreck. Thankfully, the car held up. Unfortunately, Courtney's tibia did not. He had a broken leg. He had to sit out the final weekend in Sydney of the 2013 season. So, like Tony Stewart, he's coming back from a broken leg. Like Tony Stewart, he's been working all off-season to get back to racing health. And the event in Adelaide will be his first time back behind the wheel of a race car. So, I'm curious to see what he does. Jacob, what do you think Courtney will do in Adelaide?
Oh boy, you show me some on-track footage and some lap times for James Courtney, and I'll let you know exactly what I think he's going to do. I think until we see that man get behind the wheel of a race car, I'm not entirely sure what to think of James Courtney for 2014. It's not like a Tony Stewart who runs 70, 80, 90 races a year where I could look at this and go, okay, we know how much track time he's had over the years. It's going to be just fine for this year coming back. Yes, I know Courtney's run the V8 Supercars consistently, but it's been a while for him. Out of that race car, I really don't know what to expect with him for 2014. I'll be really intrigued to see how he runs in the practice sessions prior to the Clipsal 500 to see how he goes. I'll go on record right now as saying championship momentum will be king once again. Jamie Whincup wins the opening round of the season. James, I know you've got all sorts of scenarios running through your head, but I'm not one to mess with momentum, and I'm not one to mess with the best in the business over the last couple years in the V8 Supercars.
Yeah, definitely. I think that Holden Racing Team has had, I think, a few lackluster years by their standards. They expect to be competing with FPR and Red Bull up at the top of the podium and getting those wins, getting those trophies. But the last few years, they really haven't been there all that much. So I think now that they've got SP Tools on board, who comes over from Erebus, by the way, they're going to have a little bit of extra cash to throw around, and I think it's going to be a renewed effort for them in 2014 with Courtney kind of being the harbinger. I think he might end up outperforming Garth Tander this season, just because I think that work ethic he picked up in the offseason will carry off, and I think he'll really start running back up towards the front of the field like we saw him do in 2010 when he was the champion of this series. As for a pick for Clipsal, I'm going to go with the one guy who has yet to win here but has been successful here, has had podium finishes here, because everybody else around him has won here at some point, and even guys below him. Shane Van Gisbergen shocking everybody and winning on Sunday, winning the Clipsal 500 title as well. But I'm going to go with Mark Winterbottom to win on Sunday and finish well on Saturday. How about let's take Win Cup and Lowndes on Saturday, get a Red Bull double up for those races, get some consistent guys up front. But I think it's Winterbottom that takes the race on Sunday. He's been good here before. He just hasn't had the brakes fall his way. Winterbottom will be the man taking the Clipsal 500 title when it's all said and done. So there's nothing left to do but get ready for the racing. Also, we'll let you guys know that Race Chaser Online is going to be doing a full preview of every team in the series this week. We've got our first articles up for the guys that are running FPR cars and Holden Racing Team cars, kind of the third and fourth cars of those operations. Rod Nash Racing is in there. Walking Racing is up there, so you can go read those if you like. We're releasing previews every day up until Friday. We release our race preview for Clipsal and give you an in-depth look at who might have the shot to win on the opening race weekend of the season. But in the meantime, we just get ready for our sleep because we're going to have some late starts on Saturday. How about 3:20 a.m. in the morning for that twilight race? I'm going to need some Coca-Cola, I think. Maybe some caffeinated Fosters. I don't know, something Australian to keep me up. But I'm definitely going to be watching. I think it's going to be a really, really, really fun weekend, and can't wait for the V8 Supercar season to get started.
Tom, is that legal? Well, I guess he is old enough, isn't he now?
Oh yeah, he's old enough for Foster's. Sure, it has any caffeine in it though, and I think it will probably have the opposite effect that he would wish that it would. But what the heck? I mean, fire up the Bobby and get some Foster's and invite Marcus Ambrose over and let's check it out.
Oh, Ambrose would get a kick out of that, wouldn't he? Oh, by the way, before we go off air tonight, want to tag this. Ask and ye shall receive. Remember about 25 minutes ago when we were speculating that Kurt Busch was going to be the driver of Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports car for the Indianapolis 500? Yeah, Robin Miller came and spoiled that party within the last 20 minutes. Breaking news, courtesy of the resident IndyCar expert himself. Robin Miller just broke the story that it's expected to be announced on Wednesday that Jacques Villeneuve will return to the Indianapolis 500 and race in that second Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports machine. We've seen Jacques over the last couple years in the NASCAR Nationwide Series driving for Penske Racing, the 95 kart title, the 97 Formula One title. Tom, it's not the champion we were expecting, but you can't argue his resume. Certainly not NASCAR-oriented, but maybe even more possibilities for success with Villeneuve in that Schmidt-Peterson machine because he's got the open-wheel resume to rival some of the best.
Well, I think the world of Jacques Villeneuve, but I gotta tell you, I'm harking. I come on, somebody put Kurt Busch in an IndyCar already.
Ooh, is that a black flag I smell for next Monday?
No, nothing like that. I mean, I'm not for Jacques, but I really just want to see Busch get into an IndyCar. Jacques been there, done that kind of thing. I just want to see something different. But it's a good move. It'll be interesting. I just wonder where all that came from, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about, too, and it'll be curious to see Joel's take on Monday. I still think we'll see Kurt at the 500, either in an Andretti car or a Chevy-powered car. We know Ganassi's got the resources to do it. It's just a matter of where Kurt's going to fall. He was pretty sure he's going to run it. I'm still pretty sure, and as is Joel, that Kurt will run the Indianapolis 500, so we'll just have to wait and see where the cards fall for him. But Pikester, I remember you saying earlier during our Black Flag, Checkered Flag segments that you were going to look up your Twitter guy before we went off the air. Any luck with that?
Yeah, I got some luck with that. I wish I had remembered his name earlier, but the man in question who delivered all of those fantastic retweets during the rain delay of people who actually thought that the race replay of the 2013 500 was this year's 500 was one Steve Luvender. That's Luvender. And if you put his name together, you got his Twitter address. So you can follow him on Twitter and see what he's up to. Maybe we'll get a few more humorous tweets from him over the course of the season. He seems like a funny guy, and I have a feeling we haven't heard the last of him in 2014.
I hope we haven't, because I did find his Twitter account just as you did, and I was rolling before the end of it. So go give him a follow at Steve Luvender, and we'll see if we can't roll some more chuckles out of him as the season goes along. But before we go off air, I want to slip in real quick. Phoenix International Raceway this weekend. Daytona's big enough that we can spread it out to all three series, but this weekend I just want to focus on the Cuppers. Before we go off, Tom, 500 kilometers, 312 laps at Phoenix. Who's going to end up in victory lane in the Valley of the Sun before it's all said and done?
Well, we talked about Foster's, and I'm going to stay with the beer theme. I'm going with Budweiser. That's Bentley Warren speak for Budweiser. And Kevin Harvick at Phoenix International Raceway, getting it done in the number 4.
Hey, he's the defending winner at Phoenix. I like that. Harvick was strong there in November. He's won a couple of November races. I don't think he's ever won the spring race at Phoenix, but he knows how to get around the Valley of the Sun, that mile there in Phoenix. James, who have you got for the CNBC's The Profit 500? I don't know whose idea CNBC was for a sponsor, but we'll roll with it if it means we got a race.
Yeah, hey, if the sponsor's bringing the money to make the races happen, then I can live with it. I am going to say, speaking of Australian things, Marcus Ambrose actually has a pretty good track record by his standards here at Phoenix, so he might be in the hunt for a top 10, top 15 finish, a little bit better finish than average. But my pick for this race is going to be the guy who won it in 2012, the guy who dominated Speed Weeks, and the guy who really wants to make sure that we don't have any questions left for him if his radio transmission from Sprint Unlimited was any indication. I think Denny Hamlin goes to victory lane. He's so strong on the flat tracks, especially here. I can't help but seeing that momentum carry him into the winner's circle come Sunday.
I like it. Denny Hamlin, another very solid pick in the Valley of the Sun. But as for me, I'm going to go with a guy who has been nothing short of impeccable here. Maybe not in the spring, but certainly in the fall. He knows how to get it done on just about any track he's raced at. He finished in the top 5 in last night's primetime Daytona 500. All he needs to do is win one, and he's going to be in the running for a championship, which he's done, 2, 3, 4, 5... 6 times before. I'm going with Jimmy Johnson to win at Phoenix on Sunday. I say he avenges a near miss for his third Daytona 500 trophy. No, that's right, Twitter. He did not win the race, contrary to popular belief. Jimmy Johnson, though, gets that 67th career win at Phoenix on Sunday, Tom. I got a feeling.
You and I both went out on huge limbs for these picks.
Huge limbs, something, maybe. We don't know. That's the thing. That's the great thing about it. We still got to run the race. But for now, that's going to throw the checkered flag on a huge edition of Motorsports Madness post-Daytona 500. We'll be back a week from tonight where we'll break down all the action from the desert in Phoenix. We'll talk everything from around the world of motorsports. We always have it. V8 Supercars wrap-up from the Clipsal 500, James Pike will have that. We'll talk everything that's going on. We have it all here. V8 Supercars, NHRA, Sprint Cars, Super Modifieds, the K&M Pro Series, Indy Cars, NASCAR, Formula One. You want it, we've got it on the Madness. So for Tom Baker, James Pike, Kyle Souza, Stephen Ovens, the crew of the Turn 5 Racing Podcast are absent tonight. DJ Everett and Joel Sebastianelli, for everybody that makes it happen behind the microphones and behind the glass here at Speed77 Radio and Race Chaser Online. I'm Jacob Seelman, reminding all you race fans out there to keep it off the wall. Until we meet again, catch us back on the air a week from tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. And for more motorsports content, catch us Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern for the Stock Car Steel SRI Motorsports Show. For now, we'll see you in the Valley of the Sun. Until next time, so long, race fans.